Open for Business is presented by Eagle Broadcasting Corporation and Globe My Business. Create your success.
Greetings from the Philippines to the world. It's March 23, 2019, 5:15 p.m. here in Manila. We are on Facebook Live, on Eagle News, and also on our digital channel, eaglenewslive.com. Watch the video also in the Eagle News channel on YouTube. I'm Cesar Vallejos. We are open for business. Join me discover the latest news and information and business around the world. Stay ahead of the curve from vision to action. The peso is 52.80 against the dollar. And at the closing of trade last Friday, the Philippine Stock Exchange Index closed at 8,013.42, up 58.70 points or 0.74%. The issues of globalization, digital transformation, unprecedented competition, and the shift of consumer power are affecting many aspects of business today, and that includes the supply chain, procurement, and logistics sector. New processes and systems are put in place, and there are emerging trends in the industry that compel stakeholders to revisit their entire supply chain, procurement, and logistics management to keep up to better compete in the market and deliver products and services to serve customer demands. What are the latest trends in the industry? The chairman of the board of PASIA, Mr. Charlie Villaseñor, will share his knowledge as one of the key movers of this industry. Mr. Villaseñor will join us in the set after these headlines from our business news provider, Business Mirror.
This portion is brought to you by Business Mirror, a broader look at today's business.
Grab wants to become biggest fintech in ASEAN. Philippine economy expected to grow 6.4% in 2019. Globe My Business gathers stakeholders and breakthroughs tourism to chart the future of travel, and here are the details. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Benjamin Diokno announced that the Monetary Board has kept all monetary policy rates unchanged and retained the level of the bank's reserve requirement ratio, or RRR, on Thursday's meeting as inflation pressures eased further in recent weeks. The newly appointed governor recently made what analysts have called dovish comments on handling the monetary policy toolkit, including the possibility of multiple cuts in the RRR of banks in the year's span. On Thursday, however, Diokno announced to the press that they have decided to keep the interest on the BSP's overnight reverse repurchase facility at 4.75%, with interest rates on the overnight lending and deposit facilities also kept steady. Diokno said the Monetary Board's decision is based on its assessment that prevailing monetary policy settings remain appropriate as inflation forecasts show consumer price growth comfortably settling within the 2% to 4% target range for this year and the next year. Grab is implementing a roadmap that will allow ASEAN micro, small, and medium enterprises to access the company's financial technology services soon, as the company aims to become the region's largest fintech from this year. Thursday saw Grab Financial, the fintech arm of Southeast Asia's largest super app, launching its Grow with Grab roadmap, a plan that will provide a portfolio of financial services to ASEAN entrepreneurs. It will include micro-insurance products, postpaid installment services, and an online checkout payment method for online sellers. We believe that micro-entrepreneurship is not only an economic solution, but a social impact priority and nation-building tool. We at Grab are excited to extend mentorship and market access assistance to our budding Filipino micro-entrepreneurs, Grab Philippines President Brian Koo said. Grab Financial aims to be the Southeast Asia's largest payments and financial services platform in 2019. It also plans to be the largest insurtech policy provider and the biggest fintech lender in Southeast Asia, while having the largest merchant network. Philippine economy is expected to grow 6.4% in 2019. The local economy is expected to grow by 6.4 this year, but concerns loom for every day that the Legislative Department hails to fix appropriate issues. Experts at the local bank said on Thursday in Security Bank's Corporation's Economic Forum. Its chief economist, Robert Dan Roses, said the bank still keeps a 6.4% forecast for the country's GDP growth this year. But this number is a wait-and-see stance pending developments in the national government. Experts raised particular concern about the country's ongoing budget and the standoff holds up public funds that are used to fuel further productivity in the country. Roses said the country's growth rate can fall to as low as 6%, assuming the budget gets passed in April. A full year of no budget will yield a growth rate of as low as 5.5% for the country. Despite the budget problems, the economists said they remain bullish about local economic factors as factors to the growth of the country continue to improve in recent months. Globe My Business conducted Breakthroughs Tourism, a conference held at the SMX Hour last Thursday that seeks to empower and inspire tourism stakeholders to create the future of travel. If we can just develop this particular aspect of our economy, I think this has the opportunity to provide significant jobs. About 14 million are already involved in this industry. It is an industry that we can excel at in this country, Globe Telecom President and CEO Ernest Koo said. This industry needs a lot of updating in terms of the digital world, Koo said. The lack of up-to-date marketing competency is one of the threats to the continued growth of the tourism sector, along with the entry of new players and retention of skilled employees, according to an SGS Philippines survey. While digital is changing how things are done, Koo noted that advertising in the world of hotels, airlines, in the world of tourism sites have not changed. While the provision of digital technologies, innovative business models such as on-demand lodging and short-term rentals, and the unexpected competition from online travel agencies are bringing opportunities, these are also posing challenges that hamper the industry from maximizing its growth. The Globe CEO emphasized its commitment to empower small businesses. Small business, we believe, is the backbone of this nation, he said. Companies like us will enable you through our digital assets and resources like the cloud, social media, and digital advertising. We will be talking with Mr. Charlie Villaseñor, the president of PASIA, when Open for Business returns. Stay with us.
Open for Business is presented by Globe My Business. Create your success.
We are open for business and we are here with the chairman of the board of PASIA, Mr. Charlie Villaseñor. Thank you for gracing the show, sir.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Sir, there's a lot of talk about these new developments that impact on your sector. But before we proceed, sir, I would just like, because a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses are also watching now, how do you differentiate supply chain versus procurement versus logistics.
Okay. Well, so supply chain encompasses all of the activities that is required to actually fulfill customer requirement.
Okay.
So then the procurement area talks about sourcing, contracts management, and the like.
Okay.
And logistics tackles many things around movement of goods, which is actually warehousing, transportation, and distribution. In our own way of saying it, we normally call it plan, source, and move, which is actually
plan, source, and move.
Yeah.
Which represents each of the
different activities that
okay.
encompasses the entire supply chain activity.
So this one, Sir Charlie, is really interconnected. All the supply chain, procurement, and logistics. When you say management of these three, this is really interconnected.
Yes, it must be interconnected. But then many companies sort of like manage it in silos. We're trying to encourage more of them to actually integrate it so that there's going to be more seamless integration of these activities to be able to get the net value for the particular company who's actually practicing it.
As you mentioned, a lot of them are operating in silos, but now you're talking about integration, and we hear a lot of new practices. I go straight to the point. What are the latest trends and practices now in management of these three areas?
I think there is a tremendous focus now of business owners, shareholders, and board of directors to make supply chain as a enabler of their business. We normally say that companies are not just anymore going to compete on the products or the services that they provide. Companies are going to survive and compete with their supply chains. So there are a lot of best practices coming up, but more and more companies are making sure that they have the right people, they have the right processes that is actually embedded into their systems, and they adequately use some level of technology to enable them to actually make sure that transparency, efficiency, and compliance is quite practiced by the organization. There's a lot of new things also coming up. If you will see, there's a lot of things moving on the logistic front, the use of technology, the Uberization of many things right now. As you can see, from Netflix to everything, to Airbnb, all of those things that are actually moving around are basically changes in business models on how they actually extract value from the supply chain. And we will actually be seeing more as we actually move along.
So how you said the value chain can, when you compete, can win big for your business. Can you cite examples on how the value chain management can impact positively on one's business's profitability?
Let's take a look a little bit as an example. A good example would be procurement. Many companies, regardless of your services organization or your manufacturing company, more or less you're spending something like 60 to 80% on cost of goods sold. The raw materials, all your operating expense like advertisement, human resources, everything that's actually needed to actually put the thing, to the system or to the business. That's a lot of money, 60 to 80%. If companies doesn't practice good prudence and apply strategic tools and techniques, that 60 to 80% can go to waste. They have to extract the biggest value. If you can actually just save something like 10% or 20%, or even if you're first time doing some strategic initiatives, save something like 30 to 50%, that's money right to the bottom line.
Yeah.
So companies are really looking at not just increasing revenue nowadays, because it's very important, it's very difficult to increase revenue. You increase your price, you increase your number of customers. So companies are looking into managing the cost side of the business. So they have to make sure that their inventory controls, their inventory planning, their sourcing to settlement, and even the movement of goods, which is logistics, which accounts to 30%, of cost of sales. These are real big money. If you don't manage this properly, the company can go haywire and really lose the competitiveness in surviving. So many of the executives that we see right now worldwide, are pretty much coming from the supply chain sector or practice, because they're pretty much adept on how to actually manage and control their business efficiently.
Now, sir, you also mentioned about the impact of technology in your sector, and with the latest solutions in technology, is now changing, the way we do business in all fronts and in all sectors. With the new technologies now, what happens with your industry? Is there going to be new systems, new processes? Are they going to change their ERP systems or entirely putting a new one together?
That's a very good question. If you will remember, a few years ago, if you want to implement a good system, like for example electronic procurement, you need to buy hardware, you need to buy software, you need to hire a team who's going to implement it. You will fork out a lot of money just like putting in a process actually in place.
Yes.
But the good news about it right now is like there is cloud systems available. What is cloud? Basically, there's a third-party provider who actually creates the enterprise solution for your business. So you don't have to really buy the whole thing for yourself and own it and manage it, which is actually quite costly. You can actually subscribe for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years type of a thing, and you can actually subscribe solution from inventory planning or management to forecasting, to procurement to payment, and to logistics or transportation or warehouse. This is pretty much more accessible for companies, and that's why we created that marketplace to be able to provide that opportunity for all levels of industry. So even small companies could already adopt those types of good practices.
What's say you mentioned that now because of the cloud computing,
Technology.
it's because of that technology, it's now a lot easier for them. But what about cost? Oh, but you mentioned because initially before they have to buy everything, but now they shift into the digital version of it or the cloud version of it. What about the cost involved?
Yeah, the cost has significantly gone down. Even in our own practice, when we actually make electronic procurement systems for companies, many companies, including us, we would even go to a model that you only pay once you save something.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be nice to actually see many companies not forking out anything? They call it pay as you save or pay as you use type of thing. So, and companies has the opportunity to back out or to stop the subscription when they don't find, sustainable value into actually using it. Wherein before, it's quite really difficult because you really have to make investment. The good news is like several third-party providers have actually made it available. And it's not only just technology that's actually important. Very important is to up the skill set of the people who's going to use this and to make sure that the processes are actually in place. I always say, yeah, technology is good, but let's not forget that technology is always going to be good only if the people are trained and if the process are actually fixed. But because even technology can automate, as an example in procurement, even corruption. So you gotta be watchful on how this thing is actually getting to be put in place for organization as well.
Okay. So now, as we shift to digitalization, as we shift to technology solutions, as we shift to the cloud, in terms of the impact to the business, in terms of cost savings, in terms of streamlining your operations, in terms of additional manpower, putting it. But of course, you mentioned the idea that people have to be trained on it. So there's now some sort of upskilling or retraining. So in terms of business benefit to going into the new system,
you know what? This is I would say the best news that ever came, to different industries, regardless of what type of industries. When several years ago, people were focusing more on increasing revenue, like really selling more. But when there were so many sellers in the market, people are starting to kill each other, or it's getting to be so competitive. So companies have to be more efficient. The good news is like procurement is the most untapped. Supply chain, procurement and logistics is the most untapped enabler for business competitiveness. But if you actually take a real look at it, these three areas are the one that can actually, determine your success or failure. Because all of your money, all of your customer satisfaction, all of the risks. I think I wanted to point out one important thing. In the business nowadays, there's so much risk that we're actually facing. And most of that risk are actually targeted into determining, the tranches that you have in your supply chain. Meaning to say, a lot of supply chain risks are evolving. the globalization, even technology adaptation, the cost of going the business. As we always say, companies are not going to compete. They're going to compete on how they run really their supply chain, because this is where the customer satisfaction, the cost of doing business is all about. So this particular area. So it's important that people are actually trained and even certified to actually be practicing this type of profession.
Now, sir, when you try to embrace the digital transformation, assuming your company is part of that old legacy, with the old system, what are the phases on how you transform your business?
Actually, the most important thing to actually focus into that is not just technology, as I've mentioned. It's really the change management. When people doesn't want to change, then it will not happen. Especially when you start tapping this area, supply chain procurement. As we all say, this is where the money is put by the company. So this is also where the attention of many people are going to be, either good or are they bad. So some companies or some executive doesn't want to see improvement, and there must be a reason behind that. But I think the stakeholders of the company or the shareholders has to put that emphasis. So the integration is easy nowadays. If you have a legacy system, you want to put it into a cloud environment, I would think and I would say that from our experience, technology is not anymore a problem, because there are so many ways to actually connect and integrate it properly into different types of multi-systems, because there's really a lot of systems coming up. So when the systems were actually made and developed, they actually sort of thought about that this has to connect with any particular system. So that thing is actually well in place. But I would really highlight that it's really change management and the commitment of the leadership team to actually embark into what we call a transformation in the supply chain, because supply chains are getting to be more dynamic.
Yeah, I agree with you, Charlie, and also with the other CEOs that I interviewed here in Open for Business. They say that one of the hardest areas to really change are people and culture. So now, and because you mentioned change management, what are the strategies in your sector to somehow embrace change management? Is it something? Is there a process in it that you have to do? And also another challenge based on some conversations with CEOs is that it's normally the owners or the patriarchs or the matriarchs who are somehow hesitant to embrace this. So it has change management. I don't know if you agree or what's your take on it. Is it really a top-down process? It's really, as you mentioned, it has to be that leadership who should be committed to change management.
Yes. Before you actually achieve some level of transformation, it's actually going to be people that's going to be most important in the change. But in order to actually do this, companies nowadays are doing what they call maturity assessments. So if you ask me what are the best practices, as you asked me, companies are doing to do some self-review of how they perform right now. It's not that how good they are, but they also have to take a look how are their competitors doing, because if you're lower than your competitor, you're going to miss the business. So companies are looking at what, for example, when you look at procurement, you look at procurement maturity, or we do a procurement study for companies. What you do in a procurement study is like you do a quantitative and a qualitative assessment. You really find out where the money is going and how you can actually extract more value from the money. And when you look at qualitative, this refers to people, process enablers, and more particularly governance. That's why when we actually get to introduce, or we're being pulled in, the first thing that we really focus is not just on process efficiencies. We have to make sure that we underscore, importantly, what's their threshold on ethics practices. Because at the end of the day, values is more important.
Sorry, you said ethics?
Yes, because you're trying to tap into the procurement landscape.
Okay.
So when you get into procurement, and it's very common in many countries that they've actually operated, there is what I call a lot of brother-in-law relationships that normally happen. So the change management is not going to happen if this thing is not well recognized as a blockage to improving a lot of things. So when you do a procurement assessment, you have to make sure that you take note of this, and you actually inculcate several strategies to increase the level of practice on this particular area. So it's really values formation. Then when they're actually good at it, then you start fixing the process. And when you have the process in place, you want it repetitive, you want to see more transparency and compliance, so that's where technology is going to be most adequate to be implemented.
That's a great insight, Charlie, because now, as you explain it, it really goes back to values and the culture system. It's not just, as you mentioned, technology is just an enabler, but it's really, the people and culture that has to be changed. So, we now go into risks. You also mentioned about risks management. So, what are the strategies now that a CEO or a business owner should look out for in terms of the risks that he has to really focus on?
Okay, there are several types of risks. There is demand risk, there is supply risk, there is process risk, and we also have what we call environmental risk. Let's take an example. One of the most key important for the success of many companies right now is making sure that suppliers are the right suppliers supporting their business. Can you just imagine if a company has a supplier who cannot deliver on time, who has higher costs, who has a lot of quality problems? How do you perform your own manufacture or delivery of your service? So companies want to have more visibility on how much risk are they facing. So supplier assessment is going to be most important nowadays. They need to have a proper due diligence in making sure that they know exactly their suppliers from a financial standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a human resources standpoint, from legal cases standpoint, from sustainability. Because once the suppliers gets into trouble, automatically, without even notice, the buying organization will sink down without them even knowing it. And some more companies right now are really getting into what they call global platforms. They use technologies, which they call GPAS global platform, to actually allow them to actually get the suppliers well determined or well assessed, so that they have access to information, how good or how even legitimate the suppliers are. Because if you don't really fix this part of the business, the company gets into a lot of risks or threats of sustainability. They may be good for one delivery, but they cannot be good in several multiple deliveries, as the case may be. So that's a very compelling activity that companies has to take a look into. How good are their suppliers? Because if they're not really able to do this properly, then they face the risk of even closing out their business. The suppliers cannot actually provide them with the right products on time and the quantity and the price that they're willing to pay for.
When companies would make those assessments, Charlie, is there a global standard? Is there a system that's acceptable by a lot of these companies?
This becomes so exciting for us. As a Filipino, I run two organizations. I run PASIA as a learning certification organization, not for profit, but we also have a Transprocure, which is actually a profit organization. What we do is we develop a system which we call GPAS, Global Platform for Assessing Suppliers, as an example. So all of the suppliers, all buyers would tend to request all of their suppliers to run into this particular process. And we're excited because we're leading the pack here, and we're trying to make the Philippines what we call as the best country in the world that's going to provide this service. Beyond call centers, beyond OFWs. Our vision is very simple. We think we can make the Philippines as a supply management capital of the world. We have the talent, we have the expertise, and we're ahead of the game in terms of technology. I think we can really get a big impact in helping many organizations, make efficient supply chain. Because we always believe that efficient supply chains helps economies. And if economies are good, lives are going to get better. So we have a little bit of a mission to actually make sure that we push very hard that companies would transform into efficient supply chain, because it's going to be good for their companies and employees as well.
With this initiative that you are doing, is it something that is not available yet in the market, or and you mentioned the Philippines is spearheading it, and you are one of the key players. Is that based on not only the needs of companies here in the Philippines, but are you tapping global markets for this service?
Yeah, we're working round the clock right now. So it's really like it's like, we're like really moving very fast on this area, simply because we have found a niche where nobody tend to focus on. If you take a look, we've got hundreds of call centers or shared services. But if you scan the environment, there's only one that actually provides these types of service, or value proposition to the market. So we're global, we're regional, and we're local, and we're proud that this is actually being driven out of the Philippines in itself. So we want to become number one in this particular space because nobody have dared to actually get into this particular value proposition for the market.
Okay. So we have a lot of questions, and we are excited to give that follow-up question to Charlie. Open for Business will be back. Stay with us. Open for Business is back, and with me is the chairman of PASIA, Charlie Villaseñor. We also mentioned, we talked about how these technologies, this value chain, supply chain, logistics, and procurement can also help small and medium enterprises. And that is a good thing, because a lot of the initiatives now are towards SMEs.
Yes.
And they are the ones who are using the cloud computing, the free apps, and all the other fintech resources that they can tap to ensure that they can move their business at a significantly lower cost. How will SMEs be able to benefit with the system that you are showcasing?
Yeah, SMEs should start to be excited of what's coming out along their way. Even SMEs have their own supply chain. And I just wanted to say that even SME has to make sure that they actually have to fix their supply chain so that they can be sustainable and competitive, because they're really fighting with bigger or mid-sized companies.
Yes.
And SMEs nowadays doesn't have the expertise, doesn't have the professional team, and doesn't have the scalability to be able to make sure that they can even implement the technology. So what have we done? We said, if we don't have SMEs, what will happen is, like, even the mid-size or the bigger companies cannot be supported properly. How do we actually level the playing field? We created an electronic marketplace wherein SMEs have access to knowledge. You know, we create several training around the country. For example, the Philippines, we invite them. We ask them to actually register so that their names of their companies and the profile of their products can actually be put in place. Then we actually create electronic catalogs for them so that buyers could access them. The good news about SMEs is like they would be able to access, this, and they would be accessed also by buyers. And it's not only going to be customers coming from their own regions or localities. They're going to be exposed more to whoever needs their products or services. So
it's a single platform wherein you see you have visibility of both suppliers and
buyers.
Buyers.
Yeah. So it's actually, if you're very much used on using the business to consumer portal, I think we're the only one who has the business to business
B2B,
portal,
okay.
B2B portal, So as I always say, if companies could really use a single portal, it lowers down the cost of doing business for everybody. So it seems like they have a strong opportunity to tap into this. And even SMEs buy stuff too. So if they need some materials, they could actually tap the marketplace for them to actually source and look for those suppliers that they want to deal with.
Like, for example, if I am an SME and I wanted to showcase my product there, is there some sort of a registration fee? Is there some sort of
Yes.
technical requirements that I have to go through?
Yeah, there is what we call, it ties in with what I was mentioning a while ago about GPAS. So they have to provide the documents that that ensure that they are legitimate business entities. Because on the B2B platform, a key component there is content and the proper legitimacy of that particular entity doing the business. So we do the validation on who they are really, so that we don't put anybody on the marketplace that is not really intending to do proper business within the marketplace.
So it's really something. So once you are in the system, it's really a collection of very credible suppliers and vendors.
Yes, they are all assessed. And if we find out something a little bit shady on that particular area, we will do an interaction with the supplier to prove if they should be kept or should be taken off the list.
Now, Charlie, let me go back to technology again, because a lot of initiatives now, like the AI, is changing a lot of things as well. So a lot of things are being replaced, and but there's also the issue on human plus tech, and of course we also have robotics. Now, again, what are these? How will these new technologies impact in your sector?
Yeah, you know what, when you're working along this sector of supply chain, one of the most important thing that companies should actually have is what we call data analytics.
Okay.
If you don't have proper data analytics, it's very hard to really cope up with the things that you need to do on the time that is actually needed for that particular action. So data analytics is going to be very important because companies are not just going to forecast based on history. Companies needs to forecast on what we call predictive analysis. And artificial intelligence, mechanical learning, cognitive learning, and those types of things are going to be tied in, leading to new systems which we call like blockchain. So the supply chain is going to be the most impacted among these areas. So technology on what we're actually seeing, especially artificial intelligence, is going to really complement or augment our capacity to execute our jobs faster and better. But there is a caveat here, and we all know, when there is more technology, it could replace human need for manpower work. So we have to be adaptive. We need to retrain ourselves into new areas where we haven't really explored deeply yet. So my take on this is like it's happening very fast. Everything is being Uberized in many factors, and companies come and go if they're actually disrupted by technology. But in this area of logistics, procurement, and supply chain, it's even going to go faster because companies are pretty, I would say they're bothered because things are really moving fast. If they don't move as fast as their competitors, they're gonna be left behind. So there's a lot of things to expect here, and as you said, artificial intelligence, it's even 3D. In supply chain is being used, and we get to see it nowadays. If you're seeing like things like being Uberized cars, even trucks can be done, even warehouse can be done. in electronic procurement platforms, as you can see it, there's going to be what we call group buying. Industries are going to come together. They may be competitors in the past, but when the pressure and the threshold really manifests, even competitors will have to work together. We call it competition.
Competition, yeah.
And that's where technologies could be a good enabler for them to actually stay into the market or create new values that the market could actually pull in from them.
Off-cam, Charlie, you mentioned that even the large, companies somehow were caught off guard or were shocked with all this happening, and then it's only now that they are acting on this area. Is it because sometimes a lot of the business owners disregarded this sector, and then they, as you mentioned, they focus more on sales and marketing, in selling revenues, and somehow the last aspect where they really had to focus on was the supply chain. Is that the case?
Yes. I think the pressure to make the business sustainable and to yield the highest return on capital employed is being felt, at the board level and from a shareholder standpoint. And they normally have three options: increase revenue, which is very difficult, as I've said. You cannot just increase price or market. They need to cut costs.
Yes.
Or they need to start lay-offing people. So the most prudent way is to really manage wisely the cost side of the business. So that's one of the primary enablers that they're really focusing right now, because they need to bring up their customer execution to satisfy and delight the customer. And that has something to do with inventory management. It has something to do with procurement and movement of logistics. But as we have seen so far, like in the Philippines, there's a lot of companies who are also investing now in the logistics industry business. And I think they don't want to really just, waste the resources that they have. They want to even improve their own internal organizations. If they can find revenue by offering services along the logistics industry area, they're going to do that.
Are these some sort of the warehouses that are for rent?
Yes.
What are the other services that are?
The warehouses in the logistics front, warehouses is a big part of what we're actually seeing. There's a big growth of warehouses. As you can imagine, when you actually drive through a lot of places in Manila, you'll see a lot of warehouses. And there are different types of warehouses: ambient warehouses, cold storage, small cross-docking stations, as we normally call it. Why is this happening? I think one of the reasons is because of population and e-commerce. As e-commerce push the threshold, they need to fulfill customer requirements. And the best way to fulfill customer requirements is to rally and put up this, warehousing and cross-docking sites to fulfill customer demands. So they have to execute on this particular line of, business. But at the same time, it's not only offering the service to customers. They want to make sure that their own logistics are pretty good, because some of these big organizations, their logistics spend is so big that if they save something or they make sure that things are being done well, they make their own organization efficient and they look good to the shareholders because of the returns that they can actually go and put to the table.
Charlie, I heard you mention about delighting the customers earlier. Now, what in your sector, because of the many developments now, what are the changing behaviors that you have noticed as far as customer behavior is concerned?
Yeah, the customers are so much demanding. The customers right now have been brought up from different, millennial background and this type of things. So when they want something, they want it yesterday. So when they want it yesterday, the entire supply chain creates a level of bullwhip effect. It creates a tension within the supply chain. What is really happening right now is like products are shorter in terms of cycle time. The go-to market is quite very important. The product, are being renewed on a more constant basis. Can you just imagine your cell phones? How many times have you actually changed your cell phones in your lifetime? And there are more technologies that are actually creating new features and functions of products. So they have to really be attended to. The focus is really delighting the customers, because the only way to delight the customers is when your supply chain are efficient. You are doing better forecasting. You have a better cost structure. because of your procurement, and you can deliver on time. You know, so it goes hand in gloves that these areas is actually putting a lot of, you know, pressure to the logistics, supply chain, and procurement. Because as I've said, you know, customers are getting to be much more demanding, and their patience are dwindling a little bit. No, it's like they want everything at the lowest cost, at the
best quality,
and right now even customers want you to predict what they're going to buy next.
Okay.
So artificial intelligence,
Yes.
everybody knows where you are. With your cell phones, they know exactly that we're seated here, you know, in
Where
this
we
project.
park.
Where we park, you know, how many times have you actually bought through the apps or to your credit card. So they're starting to do that. And many companies that I know are starting to really do what they call, you know, predictive analysis. And, you know, that will actually boil down to artificial intelligence so that they could process this type of information to know exactly what you are going to do next, so that they can anticipate and take value out of it.
Yeah, very interesting. So can you also mention initiatives from the private sector and the government sector that entrepreneurs, you know, can tap as far as modern approaches?
Yeah, as I said, a lot of conglomerates or large business entities are now coming into the logistics industry. But we have to also take note that it's not only local companies. I am actually seeing a lot of multinational and international companies getting into this particular league of competition. So that's something to take a look into. From a government point, I think we have seen a lot of developments here also on the build. So I think the infrastructure, all I can say is like there's no economy in the world that's going to grow if there's no proper infrastructure. So if infrastructure is there, I think the business and the people could really take advantage of it. That it has to happen. Without proper infrastructure, I think the poor masses are going to become the real victims of higher costs. Because if you don't have proper infrastructure, the cost of logistics, as I've said, is 27 to 30% for every cost of sale. So we cannot compete. And the latest logistics performance index that I've seen in Southeast Asia, we're laggard. You know, we are not one of the best. You know, even Malaysia, Vietnam, you know, Thailand have all beaten us. You know, in terms of our logistics performance index. So that's going to determine our national success, whether we could really offer, you know, products that are cost effective.
How big is the gap?
Quite significant also. You know, can we actually get back to it? I think we can get back to it, and we can actually get to be leaders if we actually do the right thing. But we need the infrastructure. You know, how can you put if the systems are not in place? But I'm seeing, I'm talking, and I'm being invited by a lot of logistics companies to actually share some insights as to what they could potentially do. And I always say it's really making sure that, you know, your people are upskilled, you know, the process are fully in place so that you have the right standards to actually operate on, which was poorly neglected in the past. And you need to adapt on technology.
It's when the first time I talked with you, Charlie, in PASIA was I remember you saying you were surprised with the many foreign delegation that came in because you know, unlike before, you know, there's just a few of the foreign participants. Is this an indication of the Philippines really providing a new system in terms of logistics management that, you know, you can also offer to the world?
I think there are quite several reasons why they come to us. They attend our conferences. They start setting up their business. I think with the population that we have, I think there's a lot of logistics opportunities here. The market is big for us. If you look at Southeast Asia, second to Indonesia, we have the highest population opportunity, and our economic growth, our economic performance, you know, whatever it takes is actually, you know, getting to that direction of more and more buying is actually happening, especially the middle class and those types of things. I think from a population standpoint, there's a strong market into this. So there's a lot of
or more, 106 million ata.
Yeah. And a lot of companies are seeing this as a big opportunity. And with the changing habits of wanting to have more, with new things, for their families, for their lifestyle and everything. I think there's a lot of activities that's actually going into that particular area. So yes, I think it's going to be a step up to what we have seen so far in the past. It's because that things are changing. There's more technology, there's more visibility, and the people would like to actually, get something that are competitive in the marketplace. The right products and the right services. So this poses a good opportunity for companies to tap into.
I cannot help but ask Charlie about the impact of the trade tensions. So with the U.S. China trade war, for example, when I interviewed the Deputy Director of Research of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, he mentioned that they're already preparing it, so they're looking at new markets. So instead of waiting, for what's going to happen, so they said we might as well look into the new markets in the ASEAN. How will this somehow changing of different alliances, trade alliances, impact on the Philippine logistics and procurement systems?
Well, that trade shift is actually happening right now. As we speak, a lot of changes. The tension between the U.S. and the Americans. There are two things that's actually happening to our economy. We are a good beneficiary about these trade tensions.
Yes.
Because if they don't do it in those countries, the natural progression is like we should actually do it in the Philippines or set our manufacturing entity. So let us welcome that with open arms.
Someone's loss is another one's gain.
Yeah, I see it's gonna be more good for us. But we also have to be careful. But because sometimes we source our products and raw materials in those countries also. So when it gets hampered, our supply chain rattles. And that's the reason why I said you really have to know exactly how your supply chains are actually operating. Not only your first-tier suppliers, but your second-tier suppliers, the suppliers who are supplying your suppliers. So supply chain professionals or the business owners has to be more, I would say, looking into those particular areas because they are going to be impacted by the trade dynamics that is currently happening.
You are also an educator. As a matter of fact, you give out a lot of this information and knowledge to young professionals. So how I'd like to know how ready are professionals in the Philippines in this shift? Like, of course, the new purchasing managers, the new buyers, so the supply chain would really have to be educated with these systems. On a consumer standpoint, in my case, I am a digital migrant. It's only the kids now who let us know of how do you order using your mobile apps and the applications that are available. In the education part, in the logistics supply chain part, how would you now be able to ensure that the professionals are ready for these new challenges?
I always say, if you're a doctor, you need to take a board and become a doctor. If you're a lawyer, you wanted to actually take the board and become a lawyer. If you're a midwife or a nurse, you actually take the board. But if you are the one handling and spending the money of your company, they pick you from anywhere.
Okay.
Like, I'm referring to procurement. Not giving a lot of emphasis. In our college education, if you look at it, we have a lot of courses on marketing, in accounting, in hospitality, in nursing, but we never really had a course on supply chain management. Isn't it? Not until now, then we actually came in, because what we found out, because if a company doesn't have good supply chains, then how can they execute properly? So what we did is we work with global standards, with global organizations who has this content and domain expertise. We crafted it and we made it globally accredited certification programs. So we actually deliver courses both in public, and in-house trainings. And we even move it to electronic learning as well. So
wow.
we're operating and delivering our trainings. A lot of them in the Philippines, but a good percentage is happening in US, in China, in Taiwan, in Singapore, Malaysia, all over the region. So we're actually bringing Filipinos to actually be at par with the best-in-class educators in the market, because we have trained them already and we can farm those talent out. But we're also bringing in new talent from across the world to actually tell us what are the best practices into these particular areas. I think, and I wanted to say this, I think we have actually ignored supply chain for many years. But if you see, and my heart really bleeds when I see long lines in MRT, long lines in comfort rooms, long lines in movie theater. It's all about capacity constraint. It's a question of demand and supply. When we actually have waste shortages, what's the problem? The problem is supply chain in all aspects of our lives.
I
So
see.
if we can actually help our country become more supply chain orientated, I think it will create better lives for us. And we can actually make sure that the way we actually conduct our operations, both public and private enterprises, has that supply chain algorithm or know-how on how to actually make sure that things are being done properly and to customer delight.
That's really an eye-opener, Charlie, because like even a lot of things when you say supply chain, it's not something concrete for everyone. But as you mentioned, the real practical problems that are happening now are supply chain based. And that's exactly what they need. We're running out of time. We'll give Charlie the opportunity to give his piece of advice to business owners, entrepreneurs, and startups who are watching now.
Yeah, I like first of all, thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to encourage a lot of business owners, regardless of size and industry, to take a look at their supply chain, procurement, and logistics. A lot of your costs are actually here. It actually boils down to proper integration of the people that you need to have to actually perform better, to actually make the processes more robust and more efficient, and some level of adoption of technology. Companies are going to compete, as I've said, not on the products or the services. Companies are going to compete and survive and determine their future on how they actually run their supply chains. And I like to encourage a lot of professionals to keep up their level of certification. We in procurement, supply chain and logistics, we need to be certified. And for those who are actually looking into new courses to go into, they always say, and the latest study have said, supply chain is one of the top 15 careers or jobs that's going to be more in demand in the future. So there's a very strong promise that supply chain is going to be where the focus of business is going to be. It's the source of competitiveness for many organizations. And it's also a source of competitiveness, not only for organizations, but for countries to actually run their own people management as well. Thank you very much.
Well said. That's the chairman of the board of PASIA, Mr. Charlie Villaseñor. Open for Business will be back with our term and quote of the week. Open for Business will return. Stay with us. In our term of the week, you take a refresher of business terms to make you updated, more informed, and ready to make smarter business decisions. Our term for the week is ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning. It is a business process management software that allows an organization to use a system of integrated applications to manage the business and automate many back office functions related to technology, services, and human resources. ERP software typically integrates all facets of an operation, including product planning, development, manufacturing, sales, and marketing in a single database application and user interface. It is a single system that embraces and integrates all aspects of business operations into a single database application. And our quote of the week is from W. Edwards Deming. He said, 85% of the reasons for failure are deficiencies in the systems and process rather than the employee. The role of management is to change the process rather than badgering individuals to do better. Join us again next Saturday, 5 p.m. Philippine time, for another episode of Open for Business, where we discuss business information, deliver the latest business news to keep you informed and open for business, and be ahead of the curve from vision to action. You're on Facebook Live on Eagle News, and you can watch these again in the video section of the Eagle News Facebook page and on eaglenewslive.com. Also visit postinglive.com for news and updates on Open for Business. Catch me later at 9 p.m. and every Wednesday, also on 9 p.m. on Net25's Eagle News International, as I report more business news here and around the world for Open for Business. This is Cesar Vallejos. Have a great day.
Open for Business was presented by Eagle Broadcasting Corporation and Globe My Business. Create your success.